It's got all the bigs: big travel, big wheelbase, and big reach. The Pivot Firebird is a great example of a big old modern enduro race bike. But just like the big hairbands of the 80s, part of this bike's business isn't just fast riffs and serious looks. It also likes to party. Before we get to the bike, Pivot is a newish company formed only in 2007 by bike industry legend Chris Kokalis. I worked at a close competitor to Pivot Cycles called Ibis Cycles from 2008 to 2015, and at Ibis we had the utmost respect for both Pivot and Chris. I've also known Brian Mason since he worked for Cali Protectives a good 8 years back, and I first met Pat Ribera-McKay back in 2003. I mention this all because the company is only as good as the people there, and when you have as many good options for a product as we do these days, it makes a lot of sense to support a reputable brand. Okay, now on to the bike. For this video, I've been riding the Firebird for a couple of months on the Pacific Northwest trails ranging from tight and technical to steep and scary to fast and jumpy. The Firebird is a carbon-framed bike using DW Link suspension, and it stretches a proper 165 millimeters of rear travel out of either a coil or an air rear shock. I tried both the DHX2 coil as well as the Float X2 and posted a full video comparing those two shocks specifically on this bike. Right now it's about 80 degrees. We've been pedaling uphill for a solid 45 minutes and we're sweating buckets. Got a few more hours of this in front of us. So we're gonna start using some electrolytes in our water bottles. As your body sweats, you're sweating out all that sodium, potassium, and magnesium that helps the electrical currents that flow through your body do its thing and get to the muscles they need to get to. If we don't drink our electrolytes, we'll probably start cramping and we won't have a very good time, and then the video wouldn't turn out all that great. Recently, I've been lucky enough to partner with the folks over at Element, and they make a really high quality electrolyte supplement. This stuff is very simple, just a tiny bit of stevia extract along with that sodium, potassium, and magnesium. And not only is this yummy, but I noticed that it helps one water bottle do a lot more in terms of maintaining proper hydration than you might think. I usually supplement one bottle on my bike with an entire hydration pack, and that keeps me going for a while. If you guys want to try this stuff, I've had really good success with it, and I've got a link in the description below. It takes you over to the Element website, and Element's running a limited special offer where if you use that link, you can get a free sample pack added to any purchase from the Element website. You can find that link at drinkelement.com/Jeff or drinklmnt.com/Jeff, Jeff. I like this stuff, Logan likes this stuff, and you guys might like it too. Thanks to Element, let's get back to the video. The Firebird features a short rear end, though the chainstay length differs per the size of the bike. I am 5 foot 8 inches tall and rode a size medium for this test. Logan is 5 foot 7 inches, and he also found the medium Firebird to fit him well. While I only have a few shots of Logan riding in front of the camera, he also rode the Firebird a few more times behind the cameras while we were filming other bikes. Now, I mentioned sizing because there is some serious fake news about this. On paper, the bike's reach is a relatively massive 468 millimeters, a mere 2 millimeters shorter than the enormous Mondraker Super Foxy. Don't get stuck thinking about the numbers. If you normally ride a medium, stick with a medium, you'll be fine. I rode the same 40 millimeter stem on both the Firebird and the Super Foxy. The Mondraker felt substantially bigger on the trail as it has a much longer back end. As for chainstays, at only 434 millimeters, the medium Firebird stays are a full 11 mils shorter than that Mondraker's. On the plus side, the short stays keep the bike feeling nimble. On the downside, the rear wheel traction isn't exactly glued to the ground, though it's not by any means a deal breaker. True to my word, another British Columbia trip was in the cards. This time, to ride perhaps the most famous town in the Sea to Sky corridor. After riding these trails with the crew from Rocky Mountain Bikes, I wanted to come back and enjoy them on a bike that's over 15 pounds lighter than the EMTB, so here we go. And we were riding e-bikes all through here, and I kept thinking, like, these trails are fun on the e-bike, but coming down, I feel like a long travel, lightweight bike could also be really fun in its own kind of way. And at the end of the day, it is. I think it's more fun to descend a non-e-bike. We went to this really fun trail that's like kind of sorta in the forest, not too rocky. There was this one section where I followed Sam Schultz through and I realized you could jump and then tire tap off this log. That's a bit of a send. You really gotta trust that it's all gonna work out. And constantly I'm thinking, like, I know this bike has a short rear end. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Well, yes, there's times where it's helpful and times where it's not so helpful. But so that little rock drop down thing, it actually felt pretty confident and pretty safe. I wasn't really worried about it. Because the bike's so well balanced, In the air, it's easy to just decide when the rear wheel is going to hit the ground. The trails here are a bit faster, flowier, but they have like quite a few undulations, almost like moto whoops. The Firebird loves that stuff. When this bike is going fast, it's really happy. But then this particular trail is not the steepest. And when it's not all steep like that, I really liked having those short back end. It was easy to get the bike around wherever I needed it to go. Some of these corners are a little bit tight and awkward. One section, you like jump in through a rock garden and then you just shoot right into the woods. And then you've got a tight right turn, cruise for a second, and then like a little wheelie berm corner thing. That's a great spot for the shorter chainstays. It makes that bike with its huge wheelbase feel very reasonable and like very appropriate. A lot of these trails here, they're high impact because you're constantly dropping off stuff and smashing into little rises. And if you have a really long back end, it can be hard to get the bike to where you need it. And then you're stuck kind of holding on, impacting a lot. With the Pivot, as long as you're a competent rider to manipulate the bike, you can end up being way smooth through that stuff. So I really quite enjoyed the setup for that particular trail. How did I feel when riding the Firebird? I felt like I was prepared, ready to try the weird option lines, able to pop off the ground with even small bump jumps, then prepared to land however and wherever gravity would then take me. And that's a good feeling. The Firebird balances speed with playfulness in a great manner. Suspension performance is not something you'll need to be concerned about with the Firebird. It's great. It feels almost firmer off the top than my Ritmo V2 and Ritmo AF, though provides deeper bottom out support than the Ibis bikes. And with almost 20 millimeters more available travel, it does feel more capable in the rough. Pedaling wise, that firmer platform of the Pivot design means absolutely zero pedal bob. The Firebird is a great climber, at least as good of a climber as any bike with a full 170 millimeter travel fork will ever be. You do end up high off the ground, and the bike has a heck of a wheelbase when on tight switchbacks, but all the other bikes that compare to this feel in similar ways. We found one of the coolest little sections of the day right at this little rock roll thing. If you had the wherewithal to scope it out first, you could ride on the top of this rock roll and then bunny hop and gap down to the lower section of trail, which sets you up for this rad wooden dimensional lumber equipped berm shot with a cool like view of the canyon. And then there's this secondary rad little rock, perfect for a foo-fanoo. And then you could try to hop back into the berm and try to go up it, but I didn't have the legs to pedal up the whole section there. That would have been really cool to get down and back up. I can't go up that hill, it's a little too steep. Would be nice though. Everyone, let's say thanks to Pivot down in the comments down below for loaning me this bike. Let's all say thanks to Logan for filming. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the red subscribe button and let me know in the comments what other bikes you want to see tested. The last few weeks I've been riding the Firebird a ton, but I haven't been filming every single ride. So I've been really enjoying this thing, and Jensen just asked me to try out a new fork, the RockShox Zeb, and I figured this is the perfect chassis to do that. So I made the swap. And we also made a trip up to the Bellingham of Vancouver just to try out some different trails. You know what? I feel like this is definitely the right kind of bike for this kind of terrain. Right away, the Firebird felt pretty solid. Back end on this bike is pretty short, and combined with the Aggressor, I made comment previously that I was thinking about going to a little bit knobbier tire, just so I could have some more traction out back. Well, we played around with the rear shocks. I went ahead and left the Fox Flow X2 air shock on here for this trip because I really like the feel of it. I like being able to tell where the bike is on the trail and what it's doing, and I also, call me a snob, but I kind of like saving that pound of weight between this and the coil. This trail has a couple of really fun, kind of like natural rock doubles. That's some of my favorite stuff to ride. One section, there's this super janky North Shore bridge, and then you gotta pump a little bit, and then you can gap off this rock, and it's a perfect natural backside. A jump like that requires a lot of rider input because there's not a sculpted takeoff, and the Firebird was right there. I've commented before that I like the leverage ratio, how the bike compresses the shock. And when you're trying to jump things, especially when things aren't actually jumps, you need to create a lot of up force by pushing down and generating a lot of initial downforce. And if you have that progression, it gives you enough to push into that you can really spring up. If your bike doesn't have enough progression, you'll actually bottom it when you're preloading for a jump or whatever, and you'll lose pop. I was able to make it over all this stuff on the Firebird, and that was cool. Because this thing is so light, and because the back end is pretty short, it's pretty easy to handle it in the air and put it where you want to. So even though it has this big wheelbase, it's still pretty lively, and you can like set it in between the various chunky items on the trail. We found this cool like section of trail overlooking town with a huge cliff next to it, and I was a little bit like nervous of going off the edge, but I thought it'd be really cool to like ride a wheelie around the corner right there. Not at like super fast speed or anything. You guys think I'm crazy? No, No, definitely not. So at a responsible pace, went through and wheelied around that. And I was kind of thinking as we were doing that, like, A, what a cool place for a trail. But B, how cool is it that this bike felt that confident and that composed in the really steep, rough stuff, but it's still playful enough that I can get away with a silly stunt like that and not feel like it's too wild or crazy or whatever. Kudos to the engineers for that. The phrase poppy and playful has become more cliche than done and dusted, toodaloo, buckaroo, later alligator, and while the Pivot jumps nicely, I would not necessarily call it poppy and playful. It can be ridden in a way that pops easily off the ground, but the long reach coupled with that DW link keep it slightly more glued to the ground than a horse link bike, for example. This isn't a bad thing by any means, as the bike has a really nice neutrality that lets it be popped when it's time, but it doesn't exactly require it. I kinda like that. This video is of course my opinion, so keep in mind if you aren't good at balancing a bike fore-aft, you might want something with a less playful feel, something with a longer back end, but that's preference and totally riding style based. Then when you do get to the really steep rock roll scenarios, it would be nice to have a touch more traction in back, but I would rather have playfulness everywhere else because honestly, I don't love steep rock rolls. I don't love riding on the brakes super hard while terrified. I'm not looking for an adrenaline rush. I grew out of that 15 years ago. I'm just looking to have fun and solve some riddles of how to get a bike from A to B when it doesn't look possible. I've really enjoyed the Firebird, and it's got some great attention to detail that would, in my opinion, make it a great choice as an all-around big bike for a rider who has Mike Tyson levels of aggression on the trail. Today, we're out here on the Firebird here in the Northwest, some of my local trails, and I was actually filming a tutorial video. Today's tutorial is how to sprint without pedaling. Every month I put out a full riding tutorial. It's on a subscription basis, so I only post them to my Patreon page, and it's $7 a month, and you can scroll way back, and there's a good like 40 plus tutorials up there on the Patreon page, so I'll link to that in the description down below. But yeah, the Firebird's a great bike for a video like that, because the way the Firebird pumps, it's very supportive. You push into it, you go forwards quite nicely. And today we have many examples of exactly that. One topic about this bike is this shorter back end. Some folks love it, some folks aren't so into it. But what I think it does is it makes the bike easier to get off the ground than the geometry numbers might make you think. So first good example of that, we had multiple good examples of that trait today. First is on this rock roll, which is like, a lot of people don't ride it, you know? It's not like next level crazy gnarly hard in the realm of Northwest mountain biking, but it's definitely steep and bumpier than it looks on camera. And with the Firebird, I rode into it, and I normally bunny hop into it, like, oh, look at me, everyone, I'm gonna jump into the rock roll. And today, somehow this bike went like 6 inches higher on that bunny hop than I was ever expecting. And I have to say, the amount of travel, the way the travel works, the length of it, it did not feel sketchy at all coming down the rest of the rock roll. So I did not regret having done that. It didn't seem too loose and wild. So yeah, that was a nice synthesis there of plenty of pop to get into some interesting scenarios, but then having the legs to take care of everything safely. The Firebird has 2 positions of adjustment for the rear suspension. In theory, this would allow someone to mount a 27.5 rear wheel for better cornering and worse jumping. I rode at the high and steep position once to simply try it, and to be frank, I prefer the slacker head angle and suspension characteristics of the low position. I prefer the Firebird over the Switchblade, as not only is a Firebird legal in all 50 states, but with the slacker head angle, it corners better and handles more confidently when ridden out of the saddle. The only trails where I'd probably prefer a Switchblade are the lower angle, less technical trails in the parts of the country that I generally try to avoid. But something even shorter travel than a Switchblade would still be even better for that stuff. Next up, it's a distinctly different feel than the Ritmo, and more purpose-built for the downs than the Ibis, with nearly 20 millimeters more travel. A Ritmo would be more well-rounded, but a Firebird's gonna excel when things get steep and gnarly. I also enjoyed the Firebird more than the Mondraker, as the Mondraker's critical lack of seat tube insertion depth, a lengthy rear end, and a steeper head angle have it much more difficult to maneuver. And now the big one. The Rocky Mountain Altitude was a great fit for my personal style and taste. The Horselink bike is a little easier to jump than any of the DW Link designs, and the 3mm longer chainstay of the Altitude was right in my sweet spot. The slightly shorter reach and wheelbase were easier for my local trails, at least for the not crazy gnarly stuff that I actually seek out. If you guys have seen other videos of mine riding other bikes and you want to hear about some other comparisons, please let me know in the comments below what you're wondering about. I want to give a big thanks to Pivot, I want to give a big thanks to Logan and Riley for helping film this, and of course, a big shout out to Jensen USA, P&W Components, and Industry 9. Jensen USA is indeed an online retailer, but they don't actually carry Pivot bikes. I'm really happy with the fact that Element, a non-endemic to the bike industry sponsor, was able to help support this piece of content, so I would not have to have any weird connections to bike industry stuff. If you guys enjoyed this video, please do hit the subscribe button, throw me a like, and let me know in the comments if you have any more questions about the Firebird. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate your attention, and have yourselves a wonderful day. Don't forget to go ride. Peace, everyone.